A single selection made 10 picks before the Chicago Bears are even on the clock could completely redefine the type of defensive talent available to us when our turn finally arrives, and understanding exactly how that domino effect works might be the key to predicting whether this organization can finally land the game-changing defender we've desperately needed. Welcome to Bears News Fan Report, your most comprehensive and reliable source for every critical update, every strategic insight, and every piece of insider analysis about our Chicago Bears. I'm bringing you exclusive draft coverage that connects the dots between what other teams do early in the first round and how those decisions create opportunities or challenges for Chicago's roster construction. Today, I'm walking you through a draft scenario that doesn't involve the Bears directly, but could have massive implications for who's available when we're selecting, how opposing teams' needs shape the board, and what type of defensive playmaker we might realistically target to elevate this defense to championship caliber. Understanding the 2026 draft landscape requires recognizing that this class is absolutely loaded with premium defensive talent across multiple position groups. We're talking about elite edge rushers with double-digit sack potential, lockdown cornerbacks who can erase entire sides of the field, linebackers with sideline-to-sideline range and true leadership qualities, and disruptive interior defensive linemen who can collapse pockets and control gaps against the run. For a Bears team that's built a solid offensive foundation but still needs to add game wreckers on defense, this draft represents a golden opportunity to find that difference maker who can take our unit from respectable to truly dominant. The challenge, as always, comes down to draft positioning and how other team selections shape what's realistically available when Chicago is finally on the clock at pick 25. We're not picking high enough to have our absolute choice of the best defensive prospects, but we're also not so late that only depth pieces remain. That middle of the first round sweet spot means we need to be smart about predicting which players will still be on the board, which positions other teams will prioritize, and where value mismatches might occur that allow elite talent to slide further than expected. Getting draft strategy right in this range separates teams that consistently hit on first-rounders from organizations that reach for need and miss on better players available. The Baltimore Ravens represent one of the most fascinating draft stories to monitor because of where they're selecting and what their organizational needs suggest about their likely approach. Baltimore picks 15th overall, exactly 10 spots ahead of Chicago, and their selection will directly impact the defensive talent pool remaining when we're making our choice. The Ravens have built their identity on physical, dominant defense, particularly controlling the line of scrimmage with powerful interior defenders who can stuff the run and generate interior pressure on passing downs. That defensive philosophy, combined with their draft position, makes their likely target relatively predictable if you understand how they evaluate talent and what their roster currently lacks. Here's where this becomes genuinely relevant for Bears fans. Baltimore is projected to select Peter Woods, the elite defensive interior lineman from Clemson, who represents exactly the type of player the Ravens have historically coveted. Woods is a powerful gap controller with the strength to occupy multiple blockers, the athleticism to push the pocket on passing downs, and the technique refinement that suggests immediate NFL readiness. He's not a flashy highlight reel player, but he's the type of foundational defensive lineman that championship teams build around, the guy who does the dirty work that allows edge rushers and linebackers to make plays. For Baltimore's defensive identity, Woods is an absolutely perfect fit, which is why multiple draft analysts have connected him to the Ravens at this exact slot. Now, let me explain specifically why Baltimore taking Woods matters enormously for Chicago's draft strategy. Every defensive interior lineman selected before our pick means one more elite edge rusher, one more lockdown cornerback, or one more impact linebacker potentially sliding down the board into our range. The draft is a zero-sum game where positional runs create value elsewhere, and teams that capitalize on those runs by taking the best player available at a different position often end up with better long-term value than organizations that reach for positional need. If Baltimore commits to interior defensive line with the Woods selection, they're passing on edge rushers, corners, and linebackers who might have been their target otherwise. Looking at the specific prospects who could potentially slide to Chicago's range because of the Woods selection and similar positional decisions by other teams, we're talking about genuinely elite defensive talent. Edge rushers with first-step explosiveness and bend around the corner that offensive tackles simply cannot handle. Cornerbacks with the length, speed, and ball skills to match up against the league's best receivers. Linebackers with the versatility to play multiple roles and the instincts to diagnose plays before they develop. These are the types of players who change defensive units, who become Pro Bowl caliber contributors, who give defensive coordinators the flexibility to be aggressive because they trust their players to execute. The Bears are currently projected to select Romello Height, an edge rusher from Texas Tech, who brings exactly the type of developmental upside and athletic tools that could blossom into a consistent pass-rushing threat. Height has the length that NFL coaches absolutely love in edge defenders, the frame to add strength without losing explosiveness, and enough raw pass rush ability to suggest double-digit sack potential if properly developed. He's not the most polished product coming out, which is why he's available at 25 rather than being a top 10 selection. But the physical tools are absolutely there for a patient organization willing to invest in his development. What makes this Bears selection particularly interesting is how it fits into the broader defensive philosophy that this coaching staff is building. We're not just looking for one-dimensional pass rushers who disappear against the run. We need complete defensive ends who can set the edge, contribute in run defense, and still generate pressure when we need it most. Height's versatility and willingness to play physical against the run makes him more than just a pass rush specialist. He's a complete defensive end prospect who can contribute immediately while growing into a featured role as his technique refinement catches up to his physical tools. The strategic question for Chicago becomes whether Height represents the best available player at 25 or if other defensive prospects provide better value. Draft analysis isn't just about evaluating individual players in isolation. It's about understanding positional value, roster fit, developmental timelines, and scheme compatibility. An elite cornerback who can start immediately and cover opposing number one receivers provides different value than a developmental edge rusher with higher ceiling but lower floor. A versatile linebacker who can play multiple roles and captain the defense brings leadership value beyond just his on-field production. Making the right choice requires weighing all these factors against what the board actually looks like when we're selecting. The Ravens taking Woods creates a specific type of draft board for Chicago, where interior defensive line depth has been depleted, but edge rusher, cornerback, and linebacker options remain robust. That abundance at other defensive positions means the Bears shouldn't feel pressure to reach for need. Instead, we can evaluate the remaining defensive prospects and select whoever provides the best combination of immediate impact potential and long-term upside. This is exactly the draft scenario where smart organizations thrive, taking advantage of positional runs to land elite talent that other teams passed on because they were filling different needs. Beyond just the immediate 2026 draft implications, understanding how other teams draft and which positions they prioritize helps Chicago's long-term roster construction strategy. If interior defensive line continues being heavily drafted in the middle of the first round, that consistently pushes other defensive positions into ranges where we're more likely to be selecting. Recognizing these patterns allows our personnel department to anticipate which types of prospects will typically be available and build evaluation processes that identify the best players at those positions. Strategic draft organizations don't just react to the board as it unfolds. They anticipate positional runs and position themselves to capitalize on the value those runs create. The broader narrative here is about how championship teams build sustainable competitive rosters through smart draft execution. You can't just draft for immediate need and hope it works out. You need to understand positional value, recognize when elite talent is sliding because of positional runs, and have the discipline to take the best player available even when it doesn't perfectly align with your immediate roster holes. The Ravens consistently execute this philosophy, which is why they remain perennially competitive. The Bears need to adopt that same patient, value-driven approach if we're going to build a defense capable of competing with the elite units in this league. Now, I need to hear directly from you Bears faithful, because this is exactly the type of draft strategy discussion that deserves input from our passionate fanbase. Drop your comment below and tell me straight up, if Romello Height is available at 25, should the Bears take him or look at other defensive positions? How important is adding edge rush help versus cornerback depth or linebacker versatility? And specifically, do you trust this regime to identify and develop the right defensive prospect regardless of position? Let's have this real conversation in the comments. To wrap this up completely, here's my full analysis on how the Ravens' likely selection of Peter Woods impacts Chicago's draft strategy. Baltimore taking an interior defensive lineman at 15 creates a domino effect where other premium defensive positions remain well stocked when the Bears select at 25, allowing Chicago to choose from elite edge rushers, cornerbacks, and linebackers, rather than feeling pressured to reach for positional need. The projected selection of Romello Height represents a high upside edge rusher with the physical tools and versatility to become a complete defensive end, though the Bears should remain flexible and take the best defensive player available when their turn arrives. Smart draft execution means capitalizing on positional runs that other teams create, and the Ravens' commitment to interior defensive line could create exactly that opportunity for Chicago. Subscribe to Bears News Fan Report right now for complete daily draft coverage, roster analysis, and strategic insights about our Chicago Bears. Hit that subscribe button immediately, activate notifications, and join our community of Bears fans who demand the most thorough analysis available. Share this video with every Bears fan who needs to understand how other teams' draft decisions impact Chicago's strategy. Drop your honest opinion in the comments about which defensive position we should prioritize. And return tomorrow for more exclusive Bears draft analysis and breaking news. This is where elite journalism meets true Bears passion. Bear down.